I don't know. And then he also wrote this book called Cryptonomicon, and it was a lot about like the one of the guys, Alan Turing, who was in the first part of the book, that I think, Andrew, you may have skipped. But the when Alan Turing was he was like this really smart, brilliant mathematician from Britain, and in the Cryptonomicon, they do a fictional account, and where he really did do this, but he helped crack the codes for the German cipher codes in World War II, and they talk about that stuff in the book. And so I found it's a really nice. It was really cool. I read those right back to back, basically, and I loved all that history. It was a little bit difficult to get through, and especially when we started getting into the transistors and some of those guys from the 30s and 40s. I was like, yeah, that's cool.
What was funny, as a total aside, when you brought up transistor, Andrew, did you realize the guy that invented the transistor radio was named Pat Haggerty? The radio
I did.
guy?
I heard that on there. Yeah.
I thought it was so funny.
Travis, Pat Haggerty's the guy who runs Right Channel Radios on a day-to-day basis.
Yeah, I noticed it, and I think I posted it in the thread. I said any relation. I said any relation at Pat Haggerty. And,
okay, nice.
So I noticed it. I was like, holy! I couldn't believe it.
Yeah,
he was
such a
totally
weird.
wrong.
I had totally forgotten about it too. I made like a note of it, I guess, when I was reading it, and I went back and was looking at it today, and I was like, oh my god, I forgot about the Pat Haggerty thing. He was meant to work in radios, I guess.
Yeah, he was totally. There's like an entire chapter on him.
Yeah,
which was pretty cool. But I got to say, so I loved all the history, and I also mentioned in the thread, I felt like the author, and I didn't read the Steve Jobs book. I have it here, but I felt like he did an excellent job of making some pretty boring topics, and some, like we're talking about math, and we're talking about, nuclear physicists, and we're talking about a bunch of, these guys aren't, but he did a really good job of making it pretty entertaining. So I really liked that. Also really liked I always wanted to know why Silicon Valley was called Silicon Valley, and I never knew, or why it was in San Francisco, like why that was a hotbed of technology. I thought seriously there was some sort, and I could have always Googled this stuff, but I never did. And so I found it really interesting that basically it was because some guy was a mama's boy, and he wanted to be close to his mom, so he moved back to Palo Alto. That's why Silicon Valley is the way that it is. Really bizarre and awesome. That we got to hear the story of, and I think that guy ended up not being successful later on, or he was kind of an arrogant pig that didn't like to work with people. At least that's how.
Was that guy one of the Intel guys?
Well, he was the guy that everybody left his business to go start Intel, I think.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
I'm not 100% positive, but I'm pretty sure that's the way that played out.
Yeah.
So.
There was so much name drop. There were so many names in the book that, I mean, if you asked me, like, the guy that invented the email system with the @ sign and stuff, what his name is, like, I don't remember any names because I felt like there was so many people mentioned in the book. That was one of the challenges for me. I had to, like, write down, like, Grace Hopper and Justin Hall and, like, a bunch of people I wanted to not forget to mention or to bring up if we had a book club, because there's so many. He touches on so many different people in the book, which is really cool because I think he probably brought a lot of people to the forefront that probably haven't really been covered much at all as far as like the digital revolution goes. So I thought that was really interesting.
Yeah, I was struggling with that with books, with trying to remember all the different characters and players, and because I have a terrible memory, it's awful. And if I've always thought, like, if I could have one superpower, people are like, what superpower would you have? Some people want to fly, some people want to be invisible. I would want to be able to remember everything I ever learned. Like, if you could really recall everything you learned in all of your classes and every article that you've read and every book you've read, you'd be the most interesting person in the world. Like, you'd be able to make connections that people, I mean, that'd be just fascinating. But I mean, I've probably retained like 3% of everything I've learned, which is really depressing, you know. And that's why it's hard in these books, that I can remember like barely a handful of names.
Yeah, so true. That is a very good superpower, actually.
Yeah,
I also had no idea that the same person that founded Blogger also co-founded Twitter. I had no idea. That's crazy.
That is crazy.
I didn't know that either, and I've heard there was some real weird stuff that went on with the founding of Twitter. There's 4 or 5 guys, and I don't think they all get along well. And I'd like to hear. I think somebody wrote a book about that. I remember when Twitter went public. When was that? A couple of years ago, Andrew. You probably know.
It's been a couple of years.
Yeah. So I didn't know that either, and I also didn't know. I mean, I loved hearing that story, how close he was. I mean, that thing was done. Blogger was done, and you know, then he and I'm certain that there's some license there. He did have somebody come in and invest some money, but it probably wasn't as bleak. It might not have been as bleak as it seemed in the book, but anyway, it was cool.
Yeah.
Really cool.
Yeah, it was, one thing was tough. I mean, you guys know I kind of bailed out on some of the earlier chapters because I started reading, and I'm just like, I had such a hard. I was Ada Lovelace. I kind of got halfway through Ada Lovelace, and then Lord Byron was her father, and that was kind of interesting. But I'm just like, how does that have to do anything with this? This is so boring. And maybe I just have no patience. I think that might be it. But so I probably skipped a good at least 40% of the book. But once I got into like Microsoft and early internet and stuff, that was fascinating. Yeah. Fascinating. Yeah. Loved it. But I don't know what it is, but I struggled mightily in those I was reading it the lazy way, right, with Audible, and so I'd be in the car doing stuff, and man, it just, yeah, I don't know what it was. It was tough too. I got the book Einstein, which I think is by, is it Walterson who wrote this one?
Yeah, same guy.
Same guy, and I don't know if I don't necessarily just connect with his writing style or what it is, but I've been listening to the Einstein one, and the early years are kind of interesting, but getting halfway through that, I'm just like, man, and then I changed over to Warren Buffett, and that one I'm just glued to like crazy. You know, I just it can't get enough of that one. So I don't know. I had a hard time getting early in, but I was amazed. Bill Gates was so. Bill Gates and Steve Jobs, especially Bill Gates, was kind of a little prick when he was younger. You know, and I feel like I'm finding out with a lot of big entrepreneurs, Warren Buffett, Bill Gates, a lot of these really successful people have very, you know, I think they soften off and mature a lot in life, like everyone does. But man, they were thorny little guys when they were young.
Yeah, you're right.
Yeah, at least that's how he made them out to be. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, I've seen some with Bill Gates especially, and Steve Jobs. I've heard Steve Jobs is just impossible to work with, but everybody loved him. But and then Bill Gates, I've seen personally witnessed like video and like boardrooms when he was just jumping down. He was in with the developers, just jumping down their throats, calling them idiots, and and not even like tiptoeing around the fact, just flat out. And I'm sure that he was a complete and total prick. But he's also he does mellow. He has mellowed out, and if you ask me, he's done a lot for society, the world as a whole, and obviously technology. And I think there's definitely, when you're at that level, there's successful entrepreneurism, which I'm trying to head toward, and then there's different level landing on the moon type so where Bill Gates and Steve Jobs and those guys land. It takes, I think, a certain eccentricity that goes beyond what I have any desire to do, right? They have a tendency, I imagine, I'm sure this isn't true for everybody, but alienate a lot of people in their lives, and certain things, very laser beam focused. I've heard that about Steve Jobs, where I think he had some regrets regarding, family life and stuff like that. But that's what happens when you build multi-billion-dollar and life and world-changing businesses.
Yeah.
So
Yeah, the
Yeah.
author, he seems to talk about all these people as being like bad leaders in one way or the other. Because the way he describes the guys that founded Intel, which right away was thinking about the show. I don't know if either of you watch it on HBO, Silicon Valley. Have you watched
love
that
it.
show?
Yeah, I love it.
So funny. And I immediately, when he was talking about how they kind of were the ones that created that they were kind of responsible for that office culture of like no rules, no really leadership, kind of the slacker Silicon Valley culture. Totally was thinking about that show and how that main character had to have been modeled after one of the Intel guys based on how he was describing them. So I thought that was pretty good. I liked that part of the book too. That was pretty interesting.
Yeah.
It's crazy. Funny you say that, Travis. I was, again, going back to that Warren Buffett book I'm reading. As the one downside sometimes about reading these great biographies of these business these business people is you get done reading it and you're just like, man, I gotta get my butt in gear. I'm not doing anything with my life. And so I was reading that and I was bemoaning to Annie. I was like, man, you know how much money Buffett had by the time he was like 32, my age, and like how much he had done, and he's like, yeah, but is it really a fair comparison? I mean, how's his family life and stuff? And I was like, I don't know. It sounds like it was pretty good. And then like they hadn't talked about it in the book. And then the next day, like as I'm driving to work, it gets into the chapter about how like he never hung out with his kids and he was always gone, and just all these family sacrifices that he made to get to where he was. And I was like, huh. That was well timed. That's nice. Because I mean, I personally like. That's tough. I would. I don't know. It's hard to put a price on having your kids not know you or love you or be connected with you. I mean, that's brutal.
Yeah, you can't put a price on that, and it's not for everybody. One of my favorite business books was written by Felix Dennis, and he's the guy that it's called How to Get Rich, and he wrote. He was the publisher of Maxim. That's kind of Maxim magazine, but that's not. He really made up most of his business publishing PC magazines in the 80s and 90s, and he didn't have a family, and he talks about basically if you want to get filthy rich, it's a sacrifice across the board, and don't expect otherwise. And if you really want to do it, this is what it's going to take, and that's true. I think, and you can't put a price on it. It's not something that I want to do. I'd like to have a nice balance. I'm not one of those people that's real big into making a big deal about life and work balance and all of that. I think I'm more of a fan of doing what you enjoy and what makes you happy. And fortunately for me, business and entrepreneurship makes me really happy, and so I don't have any problems like doing that. And then spending time with my family makes me really happy, so I don't have any problems with that balance because I just do them both, right? So at a sacrifice, I think it's on both sides. But
what was his name, Travis?
It's Felix Dennis, Denis, and it's Felix, Felix, and it's called How to Get Rich. I've got a copy of it. It's probably on my nightstand. I read it like the Bible. Like I read a chapter every night, and I've reread it. I've read it 4 or 5 times.
Wow.
So it's pretty good. So back to this book, I'll say, so one of the things that I found really interesting, I loved how he was real, the history was awesome, and I grew up, so I'm older than you guys substantially, so I had like when we started breaking into, and then the 70s, whenever IBM and the personal computer, and then Apple and Microsoft, my dad's an electrical engineer, and we had all over my house, we had wires, and we had a computer that was the size of a I don't know, like the size of a desk, like, and it had a big giant fan in the back that was like a house fan, and that's how our computer. And when I was 5, he wrote a program, so we had the first like personal computer in the late 70s, And he wrote a program, and I was like, man, he'd been building this thing for a couple of years, right? Like with wires strung all over the place. And the first program he wrote was a math program that basically for me to learn my math facts. And so it'd be like, 2 times 8 is, and then if I would have to on the keyboard type in the answer and then push enter, and if I got it wrong, it would say ding dong, you're wrong. So he wrote this program. This is like in the late 70s. And so I remember all this stuff, and then my first computer was a Commodore 64, and they talked about that in there. And so all of this history I felt like a part of, and I can remember, I was like, wow, because I can remember exactly what I was doing from a certain point on. And it was really awesome to be a part of that, and sitting there thinking, especially the entrepreneurship. I was thinking about Bill Gates and his crew of people staying up all night working, writing software because they were so intrigued with these computers, and going out and sitting in the boardroom with IBM. Anyway, so I just remember all those things. And the modem, I can remember the modem they talked about, where we would pick up the phone and set it on the modem, and it would go beep 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 beep, and that was, I can remember all that happening. And so I really got a big kick of finding out really what was going on behind the scenes and what led us to those points. Because I saw it happening in history, but not I didn't know what all was happening behind the scenes. So it was really cool, super interesting for me, and I just fell in love with the second part of that book for sure because of that. So
yeah, I'm with you, Travis. Like I think it was the early 90s I started like playing with computers and learning to program and stuff. But my parents, like, they bought me an old computer at a garage sale for me to learn on. And so the computer I used was like 5, 6, 7 years behind everyone else's, and so it's like an IBM PC Junior. I learned DOS, learned to program in BASIC, and so a lot of that stuff, even though it was a little before my time, I still was like, a lot of it clicked with me too, because I was using equipment that was a little antiquated for when I started. So yeah, it was really cool, like the old floppy disks. And did you ever use DOS?
Oh yeah, I used DOS for sure, and I even wrote. So I used BASIC in this would have been in the early '80s. I wrote programs that were kind of like adventure programs. Do you pick up the flask, yes or no, and you type yes, and then a program happens, and then do you drink it, yes or no. And so I would write these long programs in BASIC that my dad taught me how to do. And I'm not a programmer. I got out of that. I broke out of that when I was young, and then now I'm basically a business guy, and I'm dangerous enough with technology, and I know that I don't love sitting there programming. I'm much more on the marketing side, but I did all that stuff as a kid growing up, and I think that it really helped shape me as a person and what I enjoy doing. And as opposed to being in sales and marketing for, I don't know, construction or real estate, I've always been in the technology side of things, I think, because of that. So yeah, it was a lot of fun watching that. And obviously what was really cool, and probably for you guys too, was seeing how Google came about, and how the modern technology that we see now, which is not that old, and how it kind of came about, how the internet coming about was super cool, watching that all take place. And a couple of missteps, and the internet might be 5 years behind where it is today, right? So like the routing technology that made the internet possible, I'm certain that something would have come out of it. But if that one guy hadn't come up with I can't remember exactly what technology allowed the internet to basically take place, but
packet sharing.
What's that?
Are you talking about like the packet sharing, how it sends information in packets?
So it's possible that would have been probably 5 or 6 years later, and we could be in a completely different type of internet world, or packet sharing might not be the way that we do it. It might have been some other way. So really weird and cool.
Lord, do you got any memories of the tech stuff from when you were a kid at all that tied into the book?
Yeah, like I remember, what was that browser software they brought up? Mosaic? Was that it? in like the 90s, and like where they talked a lot about like online communities, like when AOL first came out, you know, and everyone like instant messenger was like the most exciting thing in the world, and uh, like Stuart Brand's The Well, they talk about like all these online communities. And then they were talking about and I actually looked him up because I had like kind of a brief memory of Justin Hall as having like the first web blog ever, and he had this blog called like Justin's favorite links, or like Justin's favorite web blogs or something, and he literally was just categorizing actual websites that were starting to like pop up when the internet first started, and he's like just started cataloging them, and he was really young when he did it too. I can't remember how old he was, but he still has that same URL, and he still blogs from it. Now he's in like his 40s, and you can look it up, because I was like, I had to do a little cyber stalking after that, because I was like, this sounds so familiar, and I wonder if he's still like collecting links, and he is. So it's pretty funny.
That's cool.
Yeah.
So I got to bounce in a couple minutes here, but Travis, are you guys can keep talking about this, of course, but Travis, are you the one who's picking the book for the next couple months?
I am. And
I'm curious. Before I leave, I'd love to know what it is.
Do we need a drum roll, Travis?
Drum roll, please. So, we have a little-known author, Travis Phipps, and it's a PPC. I'm just joking. It was gonna be. I had this all planned out. I actually wrote an ebook on PPC, and I was gonna deadpan it, but there's not enough people here for the joke to.
That would have been awesome.
But no, so this book, the book that I picked was Richard Branson's new book, and I hope you guys haven't read it. It published in September of 2014, and it's The Virgin Way, his experience in leadership, something like that. And I've never read it, which it was really hard for me not to pick a book that I already read, because I want to be like, pick a cool book, right? So the pressure's on Richard Branson. Let's see, it is. I'll give you guys and I'll obviously post it in the thread. It's The Virgin Way: Everything I Know About Leadership, and it looks like a really good book. So, and I think it'll be good for our crowd. Very entrepreneur related and business and leadership related. So, should be an entertaining book.
That sounds awesome. That sounds great.
Downloading it from the Kindle right now.
Yeah.
It is.
I just bought it the other day when I chose it. So I've just read the introduction.
It's on Audible too, which is great. Which means I can read it while I'm driving to work and back every day.
Yeah.
So cool. Well, guys, I'm sorry I got to take off, but Laura, thanks for organizing and running the kind of playing point on the book club thing. This is gonna be fun to do.
It's gonna be fun, and maybe next time we'll shoot for four people to show up, right?
I don't know. That might ruin the intimate vibe. I kind of like this, just 3 people bouncing ideas. I don't know how you get to talk like half the time almost. It's wonderful.
Yeah, I know. Well, it was good to catch up with everyone.
Yeah, it was. It was great to catch up with you guys. Yeah, I'm certain. Hopefully, we can we'll get some more commitments out of people next time. And
yes.
But yes, Laura, thank you so much for putting it together. I thought it was an awesome idea, and I really appreciate it, because you got me out of my comfort zone in a book that I wouldn't have read, and I thought it was an awesome book, and I loved it, and I've already suggested it to a bunch of people. So I'm so glad that you came up with this idea, and I'm glad to be a part of it. So, and I can tell a lot of other people did too, because of the thread. It seemed pretty popular.
Great.
So.
Awesome. All right, guys.
Good seeing you guys. Have a good weekend. I'll see you later.
All right.
Next pick.
Bye, you guys.
Bye.